So welcome to lecture 3 on refraction. So in this lecture we'll talk about vision and optical instruments. So what are the optical instruments that we commonly use? So the number one is your own eye. So the human eye is one of the most interesting of all optical instruments. So because it's remarkable that it can form so many images with so less work. Right, so what you're looking here is the anatomy of the human eye. So the main parts that we require for understanding the optical nature of eye is to look at the cornea, the aqueous humor, the lens, the vitreous humor, fovea, and the retina. So these are the main things that you require to understand how light enters your eye and how an image forms in your eye. So one of the main important instruments in your eye that can increase the clear vision. So for every clear vision, so you have to have a real image to be projected on the back of your retina. So if it is projected on the back of the light sensitive retina, then that itself forms a clear image. Now, so the lens of the eye is one of the main instruments here because it can adjust the focal length. So one factor that we use here to represent the power of a lens, so we use called power. So it's defined as the power of the lens. So power of the lens P is the inverse of the focal length. So this is the formula that we commonly use. So lens here adjusts focal length, or you can also understand that it adjusts the power of the lens. So power here is basically how much is the refractive index that it can adjust to make sure that it can bend light. So the center of the image is always falls on the fovea. So the small bend in the back of your eye. So which has the greatest density of light receptors and the greatest acuity in the visual field. So acuity basically means the sharpness. Now, so the variable opening of the eye along with the chemical adaptation allows the eye to detect the light intensity from the field. So this variable opening of the eye is what causes the change. So either there are two things that generally happen. One is either the lens becomes more flatter or the lens becomes more rounder. These are the two common ways by which lens can adjust the refraction of the light waves that are entering your eye. So our eye has a vast number of functions. So you can sense direction, you can sense movement, you can sense colors, you can sense distance. So the processing of the visual nerve impulses begins with the interconnections in the retina and continues from here on to the brain. Right, now let's talk about the image, the properties of your eye. So this is a table that explains the index of refraction of each of the parts of your eye. So water generally has a refractive index of 1.33. The value for cornea and aqueous humor is nearly similar to that because most of it is water, and the lens has the highest amount and it generally varies throughout the lens, and it generally is the greatest at the center of the lens. Even the vitreal humor is similar to that of water because it's majorly made up of water. Now, how do the refractive indexes affect the way you see? Is generally the cornea provides about 2/3 of the power of the eye, owing to the fact that the speed of the light changes at the cornea, and the other layers also help in producing one main thing. Notice the shape of the lens. Your lens has a convex shape or a converging lens. So it's a converging lens. So it converges the light that falls on. So how would the image formation occur? So let's take an example of a general tree. Let's say you're looking at a tree. So the light rays generally come straight through as if it's general lens, and they start bending at the aqueous humor. Notice that it's entering from air into the aqueous humor. So which means that you're going from a rarer density to a higher density. So it bends inward, and at the lens also has a higher refractive index, it bends much more, and at the end it ends up forming the image right at the fovea. This is the general formation of your image, and the image in general is inverted. So the image that actually hits your eye is actually inverted. So this is the idea behind the way in which your eye detects the way the objects fall on it. It's similar to that of a camera. A camera does the same exact thing. It actually inverts the image and captures the image on the sensor. The sensor here on your eye is the fovea. But the adaptation of your eye is its ability to see things that are really far away from you and things that are really closer to you as well. So this it does by adapting the power of the lens. For objects that are really far away, the lens starts to flatten. When it starts to flatten, it generates a small power. So if it's a small power, it produces a large focal length. And when the objects are really close, the lens starts to round. So it starts to round and it creates a large power and creates a really small focal length. So let's take an example and how does it do that? What is the range of the power of the lens? So if you take the general equation 1 by f is equal to 1 by d plus 1 by d naught plus 1 by di. Remember that d naught is the distance of object from the lens. Di is the distance of object from the image. In your eye, di is constant. Is generally constant. This di is the length of your eye, that's about 2 centimeters. So di is a constant. So what your eye does is it manipulates d naught. So d naught is the value that it can use to manipulate. So what it does is, remember 1 by f is the power. So P can be written as 1 by d naught plus 1 by di. So if that is the power of the lens, so I already told you that height of the image by height of the object is called as the magnification factor. Now d naught, the smallest value, the minimum d naught that you have to use is 25 centimeters. Right, so the d naught values range from 25 centimeters to infinity. It can large, so the minimum value that it requires to look at an object is 25 centimeters. For example, you can take you can close one of your eye and try to bring your finger closer and closer. You start noticing that the actual clarity of the image is much lesser and lesser, but at a distance of 25 centimeters you can actually distinctly watch the object clearly. That distance is 25 centimeters, is called LDDV, or the least distance of, let me write it clearly here. So LDDV is called as the least distance of distinctive vision. So what is this value? This value is where you can actually distinguish between two objects, or you can watch two objects at the same time. This is the distance where you can distinguish one object from the other. So this is the value that you generally use. Now let's look at the power of the lens when you have close vision and when you have far away vision. What is the range of the power of the lens? So if you have, let's say for example, a general size of the human hair. So what is the size of the image? For example, let's say of the human, if you take the power of the lens, how do you calculate the power of the lens when you generally see it? Let's say there is a far away object. Far away means that d naught is nearly equal to infinity, meaning that it's really far away. Then the power of the lens is given by 1 by d naught plus 1 by di. So 1 by infinity plus 1 by, so that's about 2 centimeters, so that's 0.02 meters. So when you calculate 1 by infinity is near 0, so the value is 1 by 0.02. So 1 by 0.02 is 50.0. This value is measured in D. So P is measured the power of the lens is measured in a unit called D. D is also called the diopter. So diopter. So this is when you have far away, right? So this is the value of the power of the lens when when the image is far away. When the image is really close, remember that the minimum distance is 25 centimeters. So if you have a 25 centimeter object that's near to your eye, that is from d naught, 1 by d naught plus 1 by di, that is 1 by 0.02, sorry 0.025, sorry, that's 0.25 plus 1 by 0.02. That gives you a value of 4 plus 50. So the value is 54.0 D. This is when you have close vision. So the power of a lens, so the power of your eye, so lens of your eye, let me write it this way. So the power of lens of the eye ranges from 50 diopter to 54 diopter. So if this is the range, then why do you need to wear glasses? For some people, if this is the range, why do you need glasses? This is the point that comes through when we talk about the defects in the eye. Defects or the corrections that are needed. So if the lens is too strong, meaning that it does not change flexibly, so if it's too strong, or if the eye is too long, meaning that either the lens does not, so lens is not flexible, or if the di is greater than 2 centimeters, generally it causes a condition called myopia. Myopia is where the image forms right in front of the retina, not on the retina, but right in front of the retina. Remember this, that the image forms right in front of the retina, not on the retina. Next is hyperopia. The other condition is where the lens is really too weak. If it is too weak, the image forms beyond the retina, or even if the eye is too short, meaning that if the di value is less than 2 centimeters, then also the case is that the image forms beyond the retina. So what can myopia do and what can hyperopia do? So myopia can cause nearsightedness. So myopia, also called nearsightedness, is a condition where you are unable to see distant objects clearly. Right? The other condition is hyperopia. Hyperopia is also called the farsightedness. Farsightedness is where you are unable to see close objects clearly. So what do you do when you have hyperopia or myopia? Is the problem when you have, the chances are that there are two ways in generally done. Notice I told you about the strength of the lens and the weakness of the lens, or the lens length, the length of the eye. There are two things that generally cause these imperfections. One is the flexibility of the lens, and the second is the length of the eye, whether it is too short or whether it is too long. So if the length of the eye is the main factor, the more common method that is done is, more common method that is done is by using external lenses. For example, what do you do for myopia? So myopia, remember that the image forms right in front of the retina. So what you want to do now is, rather than forming the retina, so you want the actual rays that are coming through to refract a little higher. So to have a smaller refracting angle, so rather than having a larger refracting angle, so for that, so for myopia, we end up using a diverging lens as a correcting lens. So it's also called as a correcting lens. So this is the lens that corrects the change in the length of the eye or the change in the flexibility of the lens. So what it does is, rather than forming the image here, so it refracts the light rays a little more and causes it to form the image right on the retina. So this distance change can be calculated as a change in power. So remember that I told you that your eye has a value of 50 to 54. So if you have a longer or a shorter eye, if you have any defects in your eye, then this will change, meaning that a person, if he has a power of a lens of 48, for example, to 52, he needs a lens which can adjust plus 2D, meaning that both the values have to increase by plus 2. So this is the idea here when you have the lens here. For myopia, a person generally has longer than usual power, which means that he might have, for example, say greater than 50 for closer vision, and greater than 50 for far away vision, and 54 for closer vision. So which means that he has to be corrected for 50 sphere. So generally the lens power that is given is negative. So the range of this power is generally from minus 1.5 to, for example, if you have a really bad minus 5.5 as well. So this is the range of lenses that the doctor will prescribe you. So when you go to optician, this is the number that you give the optician. Then using this number, he'll make the lens accordingly. So this is how the doctor generally checks whether your spectacles need a certain power or not. So this is the value that you are using for the power of your spectacles when you have a myopia condition. Myopia, remember that this is farsightedness, where you are not able to see objects from far away. Sorry, this is nearsightedness, where you are not able to see objects that are far away from you. Next is hyperopia. In hyperopia, the lens that is used is a convex lens or a converging lens. So here the image is forming far away from the object, far away beyond the retina, which means that you don't want it to go that far, meaning that you want to bend it right away. So you don't want to have a higher refracting angle, rather you want to have a lower refracting angle when it hits the eye. So what happens now is that when you put a correcting factor now, so that correcting factor now causes the image to form on the retina. So this is the idea behind the concept of correcting hyperopia. So for this hyperopia, so we use a converging lens as a correcting lens. So in this case, what are we having is that if you have general power is 50D to 54, the person might have 52 to, for example, let's say the person might have 48D to 52D. So this is an example. Remember that I am not saying exactly, which means that here we have to prescribe a lens that has a positive power. So the range of power ranges from 0.5D to plus 5.5 also sometimes. So these are the cases that we generally see. So one way is by using the corrective lens. The other method that's commonly used these days is LASIK. I'll be attaching a video to the lecture so that you can see how eye surgery is generally performed and how LASIK generally works. So LASIK comes from the word laser vision correction. So we use laser to correct the vision. Most common way that is done is by scraping a bit of the lens length. So we are basically taking out scraping a bit of the length of the lens. So that's where the scraping a bit of length or the thickness. So I'll be attaching a video to the lecture so that you can see how it can be done. So this is the idea behind the sense of the topic of how your eye works and what are the common conditions you see. So remember the two conditions, one is myopia, the other is hyperopia. Myopia is nearsightedness, where you can see objects that are near to you but you cannot see objects that are far away from you. Hyperopia is where you can see objects that are far away from you, but when they are closer to you, you cannot watch it clearly. So this is the idea behind this. Next. So the next is devices that are commonly used to detect small objects. An example of that would be compound microscopes and refracting telescopes. Compound microscopes and refracting telescopes use a combination of thin lenses. So they use a combination of lenses. So what happens here is the image formed by one lens becomes the object for the second lens. So by using two converging lenses, a compound microscope has a greater magnification, and that can be achieved by combining two or more lenses. How does this work? So most common way it works is, if you take the magnification of the lens is M1, first lens is M1 and the second lens is M2, then the final value or the equivalent value is the multiple of these magnifications. For example, let's say if you have a telescope, if you have a microscope of 500x magnification, so the word 500x represents 500 here represents the magnification of that particular microscope. It can be achieved by using a lens of magnification 10 and by using a lens of magnification 50, or we can use three lenses of 10, 5 and 10, or we can use four lenses. This way, by combining lenses, we can actually increase the magnification by a factor that we can increase it by. So let's take a simple look at how a general construction looks like. So this is how a general compound microscope looks like, but if you look at it in terms of their lenses, this is the general construction of a compound lens. So what happens here is the height of the object is really small. Notice that you start with a really small object, and the first lens is called as the objective lens. It increases the height of the lens by a certain magnification factor, and by using the eyepiece we can change the magnification of the second image that you end up with and get the final image, which heightens up the final magnification factor to a really high value. So the eyepiece is generally, both lenses are generally converging lenses. So the first one creates a real image and the second one creates a virtual image. So this is the idea behind the construction in a microscope and how it works. So when you want to calculate the actual magnification factor, so the magnification factor of the compound microscope, so MC can be written as the magnification of the object, this objective lens, into the magnification of the eyepiece. So this is the formula that we use. For example, if you see a lens that has a 100x magnification factor, it means that one lens can create, for example, 50, and the other lens might have 2, and that ends up with 2 times 50, which you end up with as the 100x lens. So whenever, if you have a spindle on the microscope, it means that the spindle actually has the lens. So this lens changes. For example, if you are changing from a 100x to a 200x, so 50 does not, the eyepiece does not change. So the eyepiece is the one that you are looking from. The one that changes is the objective lens. So for example, 2 can change to 4, 4 can change to 6, so and 4 can change to 8, 8 can change to 16. So by doing this, we can increase the magnification factor much higher. 4 times 50 becomes 200x. You get 8 times 50 becomes 400x. 16 times 50 becomes 800x. So this is how we can see, if you have a spindle on a microscope, that means this is the eyepiece is the one that's changing, not the objective lens is the one that's changing, not the eyepiece. So eyepiece stays constant, but only one of them is manipulated to increase the magnification factor. So this is the idea behind the magnification of a compound microscope, and this is generally how microscopes generally work. Next, let's talk about the final one, optical phenomena. So the common optical phenomena that you generally see is, let's take the example of refraction itself. So we told you that when you have when you have, let's take a consideration of a light that is going from air into, so air and water into air. In this case, let's say there is a light ray that's going from water into air, from a denser medium into a rarer medium. So when the light ray comes in, it bends away from the normal. So this here is, so this is the angle of incidence. When you manipulate the angle of incidence, we notice that the angle of refraction starts increasing rapidly. So for example, let's say there is another light ray that you are projecting, let's say it comes this way, and it's going to increase the refracting angle again. So notice that as you increase the angle, it starts increasing more and more again. At a certain angle, when you hit the ray, it generally grazes along the surface, right? So this angle at which, so the angle theta I at which theta r is 90 degrees. So theta I at which theta r becomes 90 degrees is called the critical angle. So between water and air, this theta I value is called theta c, which is about 55.7 degrees. This is the general value that you need to hit from water into air. Remember, from a denser into a rarer medium. So you have always, this phenomenon occurs only when you have denser to a rarer medium. Let's say if you increase the angle more than the critical angle, what happens then? Let's say we have a light ray that hits more than the critical angle. What happens at that case then? Let's say this is the angle at which you are trying to hit the light ray. Remember that then theta r becomes larger, much larger, and it ends up going back into the medium. So it increases the angle much further, and rather than actually refracting, so the light undergoes reflection. But why? How does it undergo reflection, and how is this phenomenon occurring, and why does that refraction looks like reflection? Because notice that this is still refraction, but it looks like reflection because the light ray that is coming in is going back into the same medium. Notice that here also it's water itself. It's coming from water, it's going into water. This phenomenon is called as the total internal reflection. So this phenomenon is called the total internal reflection. It occurs, so TIR occurs when the incidence angle is greater than the critical angle. So then theta r becomes greater than 90 degrees and causing it to reflect back into the same medium. So this phenomenon is called as the total internal reflection. So total internal reflection is the reason why you can see rainbows, you can see mirages. This is also the reason why how optical fibers generally work. Let's take an example of rainbows and how the rain. So let's take a look at some examples of total internal reflection. So this is an example of how the light rays generally travel through an optical fiber. So this is the example of an optical fiber. Where would you use optical fibers? Best example of an optical fiber is used in laparoscopy. So in laparoscopy you use it to insert it in. If you see any scopy there, wherever you see the term scopy, it basically means that you're inserting a tube into the body and looking at the inside of the body from the outside. So how can you look at it that way? So one example of that would be to take a look at the example of how the inside, when you do, for example, let's say laparoscopy, this is what it would look like. So what is happening there is you illuminate the object here. So you're illuminating the light. At the end of it, there is a light that illuminates the object. So it undergoes total internal reflection and reflects back into the tube, and it travels through the multiple tubes, and it's attached to a computer. That computer generates this image. So this is the idea behind total internal reflection inside an optical fiber. Other example of this would be to take a look at diamond and also the binoculars. A binoculars actually uses two prisms. So the prism that it uses causes it to undergo total internal reflection inside the object and causing it to form a final image at the end of it. Alright. So even a diamond sparkles because of the total internal reflection, because the light is not exiting the diamond, rather it is hitting the diamond inside itself and continuously hitting inside. Because it's continuously hitting inside continuously, therefore this light stays longer in diamond than in air, so that's why it generally sparkles. Right. So one another example of this is a phenomenon called dispersion. So what is dispersion of light? So let's take a simple example of a prism. So prism is basically a glass piece. So this glass piece, when you hit white light that comes from a certain distance, remember that you are going from air into glass. So you are going from air into glass, and from glass again you are going into air. Remember that it undergoes double bending, meaning that it's going to go straight through and then it's going to come out. So if the light that is hitting is white light, so white light, when it spreads, when it hits at a refraction, so refraction can split light into individual spectrum. How does it do that? Is by the process of dispersion. So dispersion is the process by which the light rays disperse into individual wavelengths. So individual wavelengths. So the ray with the higher wavelength has lesser refraction. The ray with the lower wavelength has a higher refraction. So let's take a look at how white light, when it hits a prism, what would it look like? So this is how light would look like when the light coming from the sun hits the clouds. The clouds end up refracting the light ray and causing it to split it into individual colors. Notice that the red bends the shortest because it is the highest wavelength, and violet bends the highest because it has the largest wavelength. So the same phenomenon also happens with prism. When you take a look at a general prism, it also undergoes the same phenomena. Right, so the white light that is coming in, when it hits it, it splits into individual colors. Notice the colors that you generally see here. You start from the red on the top. So you start from red on the top and you end up with violet at the bottom. So the violet one is the one that bends the largest because that has the smallest wavelength. The one with the larger wavelength refracts shorter. The one with the smallest wavelength refracts higher. So this is the idea behind the property of dispersion. Dispersion is also the phenomenon by which you can see the rainbows. So if you take a look at a general water droplet, when the water droplet is coming down, so if the sun hits it at a particular critical angle, then it bends such that it splits it into individual spectra, where violet refracts at a different angle than red, causing it to create the spectrum of colors that you generally see. So when you are looking at it, how would it look like? So this is what it would look like when you are actually looking at the object. So when you are looking at it, it will actually look so when you are looking at it, the light rays that are hitting will refract at a different angle. That's why you see the spectrum of light as a color. So why do you see it to be a semicircle? The semicircle is because that the clouds, the Earth is round. So because of that reason, the light that falls on will always form through the circumference of the Earth, and that's why it generally creates a semicircular shape. So this is how you generally end up seeing when the light comes through, you end up seeing it from this way. So what is happening here? The violet bends the largest, that's why you see at the bottom violet, and red bends the smallest, so that's why you generally see red at the top. So this is generally how you end up seeing a rainbow. So that is the final phenomenon of rainbow. Next, the last one is also the lens aberration. So lens aberration is a mechanism, the common thing that you generally see is generally called chromatic aberration. So when you put a CD, or any device that you generally see, if you keep it to the sunlight at a certain angle, you notice that it starts showing different colors. That is because lens also can do the same exact thing when it hits the lens. So this is how it can create colors as well when you have. So this phenomenon is called chromatic aberration. So is the focusing of different colors of light at different distances behind a lens. So it generally occurs because the index of refraction varies for different wavelengths of light. So every wavelength of light has a different refraction. That's the reason why it ends up creating the aberrations. So with that, we end the lecture on refraction.